Elm Park Journey. My name is Dr. Bill Miller. I am the Church Council Chair here at Elm Park United Methodist Church. This is a web series, and in each episode we have a special guest that talks to us about upcoming events, programs, and announcements. My guest today is our Senior Pastor, Reverend Mike Bealla. We have been hearing a lot about General Conference coming up in just over a week. Could you explain what General Conference is and why it's so important?
Wow, that's a good question, and I know this is supposed to be a short video, so we'll do it as quickly as we can. The United Methodist Church is a connectional church, meaning that we have there's only one church, but we have lots of storefronts, if you will, around the country and around the world. And there are guidelines that we use to help guide the church to stay faithful to its task of ministry and mission. And our governing bodies are set up as what we call conferences. So the local one, the one that we know best, is the annual conference, which sounds like a meeting, but it's also an organization, so it's both things. And we gather pastors and laity in equal numbers each year at annual conference to care for issues that have to do with our area, with our immediate area. The general church, every 4 years, gathers clergy and lay in equal number from around the world to come together to work on legislation, to review where we are in our life together, to set the standards for what we preach and teach, and put together each 4 years a book of discipline. This is one from the last one, the newest one, and you're going to notice that it says 2016, which is kind of a rarity that we haven't had a 2020. But what happened was, after the 2016 General Conference, a special session was called in 2019 to handle some special issues, and they didn't resolve anything. So the plan was, well, we'll just come back together in 2020 and we'll do the new discipline. And what happened was, you may have heard the word COVID. COVID came and 2020 suddenly was upon us, and there was no way that we could meet to do it. So, at the end of April, beginning of May, we will be hearing about General Conference 2024. It will take place in Charlotte, North Carolina, and representatives from each of the annual conferences then come, including those annual conferences which are called something different overseas, but they're called central conferences. Representatives from all those are gathered together in one place, and for 2 weeks, or it's actually 10 days, they will gather and work on proposed legislation that will help guide the church into the next few years. So it's an exciting time, it's an important time, and when they're all done, they will produce a new book of discipline, which new guidelines in it for our life together. I should say that the only thing that never changes in the book of discipline is the first 2 sections of it, which deal with our Constitution and the teachings of John Wesley, the sermons of John Wesley, theology of John Wesley cannot be changed by the General Conference. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. I hope I didn't confuse you too much, but that's General Conference.
So you mentioned they're getting together in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And you said you're coming in from all over the world. Approximately how many people will descend upon Charlotte, North Carolina?
Very good question. The actual delegate number is around 800.
Okay.
But with them, a lot of extra folks come. Conference officials, interested people, local people who are interested in it. So there'll be quite a gathering there. But the actual people who get to decide the legislation are 800. 400 clergy, 400 laity. The bishops are there, but they cannot vote. They just organize the meeting and run the meeting, carry out the meeting.
So does this mean every minister will descend upon Charlotte, North Carolina? Or do you have like a representative that will go to represent you or this annual conference?
We have a set of delegates from this annual conference that were elected at our annual conference to go to General Conference. Wesley, my son Wesley, is one of them. Okay. He's going as a reserve delegate, which means that he stands by when somebody has to leave the floor for a while. He will be filling in.
It sounds like it'll be an exciting time in United Methodist Church.
It will be a challenging time because there are some big issues.
Well, that leads us actually to our next question, and could you tell us about some of the big topics that will be discussed and voted on at General Conference?
Well, you know, every topic is a big one, in a sense, because people's lives are being touched by what we decide. But of course, the one everybody's familiar with, or at least have heard about at this point, is the whole LGBTQ question as to whether or not persons of that persuasion should be allowed to be leaders in the church,
Okay.
for lack of a better explanation. And so since 1976, the language in the discipline has gotten more restrictive in terms of participation of the LGBTQ community. And we continued to strengthen it first said that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, and then it went on to say even more, and then restricted them from becoming pastors and all kinds of things. Gay marriage could not be carried out by a pastor. And in 2016, everything hit the fan, so to speak, and it looked like we were going to have a big church division, a schism. And the wisdom of folks was that, well, let's send it back to the bishops, and we'll have a special session in 2019. We'll look at this whole issue, and maybe we can find a way forward to keep the church together, but also agree to disagree on certain issues. Well, 2019 was a disaster, quite frankly. It didn't go well, and the legislation, as it is now, was passed. It stayed there. Nothing changed, but a good portion of our churches decided that they didn't want to continue to be United Methodist and started a procedure for leaving the church, leaving the whole body of the church. So coming to this general conference, that will be a big issue. There's a couple of plans that will be coming forth, be put forth to consider. One of them is the regionalization plan, which I hope, and many people hope, passes. One of the big issues for us is, for instance, about 40% of the delegates now come from the fastest growing churches in the world, which happen to be in Africa.
Okay.
Africa is bound by local legislation, rules, national rules that make any participation in homosexuality or even participation of homosexuals at any level a death penalty case.
Okay.
So they're in a tough spot. And because they make up 40% of the vote at General Conference, to pass any other legislation is very, very difficult because they're going to vote no. So regionalization says there are differences in your culture and my culture and other countries around the world. And what if each general area had their own, each region had their own book of discipline with some specific rules for their area, while keeping the basic rules and order of the church intact.
Okay.
That's what the regionalization plan is. Now, there are some other plans as well. We're hoping that this one passes and that everybody will stay part of the church rather than another exit of more churches from another nation somewhere. Anyway, so that's in a nutshell, that's the biggest issue. One of the other is going to be whether or not we ought to raise the retirement age level for clergy, since clergy are getting harder to find and living longer. The feeling is that we could help ourselves by raising the mandatory retirement age, which I think that probably, it's now 70, I think they'll probably come out making it 135, whatever. But that's that, yeah.
But isn't it in the Methodist Church that when a minister retires, they don't really retire, they just get reassigned?
Well, the old joke was they put out the pasture. They can be reassigned. At that point, it's a personal choice whether you would like to take a congregation or not.
Understood.
And usually it's a part-time appointment somewhere to help the church out.
So really the big topics that they're going to be tackling at General Conference are really a cultural
Yes.
issue.
Yeah.
And it's really cultural when you look at it from both ways, from both the LGBTQ and the retirement issue.
Yeah.
Also cultural, and then really an interpretation of what's in the Bible and how it was interpreted years and years ago. Okay.
Yeah, and that kind of narrows it. In reality, there's probably 800 pages of resolutions being put forth on all kinds of issues. So it's going to be an exciting time for the folks that are there, and we'll try to keep everybody informed as to what's happening.
Okay. And now, and I believe I've heard this in the past too, that you'll sometimes get kind of some resolutions that may come in from left field that were never discussed prior to hitting the floor, or is
It's
that
possible, yes, things can be raised from the floor. But the entire first week is to take all the resolutions that they already have in hand, give them to small groups to work on them, to refine them, and to give them their best shot to pass as they're written, so that you're not being amended to death all week long.
Understood.
But something can at any time come up off the floor and be raised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's a very enlightening description of what happens at General Conference, and sounds like it'll be an interesting time in Charlotte, especially I find it kind of odd at times. You have Charlotte, North Carolina, which is the southeast views Methodism in one way, and the northeast views it in another. So I think trying to get all those folks together and working in one direction has got to be quite difficult. But I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
This ends this episode, but if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please feel free to contact Reverend Mike or myself. I would like to thank everyone for watching the Elm Park Journey as we go along. Would like to thank Reverend Mike for his ministry and for being our guest today. And if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button down below. If you have any ideas of topics you can discuss, please feel free to talk to our communications director, Wesley Bealla, Reverend Mike, Diana Howe, who is our lay leader, or myself. Have a blessed week and stay in prayer. As we share our blessings and our struggles, we can support each other as we explore God's call for each of us. Let us help each other find ways of making disciples for the transformation of the world. Grace and peace for the journey. At Elm Park United Methodist Church, all are welcome because we are better together.